Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're going to be looking at this whole world of giving and taking and how it relates to success.
Fascinating topic.
It is.
Yeah.
We got some great excerpts from Adam Grant's Give and Take to help us out with this,
Yeah.
and also some interesting research studies that we can kind of unpack as well.
Great.
And hopefully, by the end of this, you will understand a little bit more about the benefits and the risks of being a giver.
Sure.
How to give effectively without being a pushover.
Yeah.
And what we can all learn from the habits of highly successful givers.
It's a topic full of surprises.
It is.
You know,
Yeah.
you might assume that the takers of the world rise to the top, but
Right.
Grant really challenges that notion.
Yeah, we've all heard that saying, nice guys finish last.
Right.
But is there more to that story?
Yeah.
Grant kind of kicks things off by introducing this idea of reciprocity styles.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to say, it's not as black and white as you might think.
It's definitely more nuanced than just good versus bad.
Yep.
He outlines three main styles: givers, takers, and matchers.
Cook.
You can probably guess what givers are all about.
Yeah.
Prioritizing the needs of others, often without expecting anything in return.
Right.
Takers, on the other hand, are focused on maximizing their own gain,
Uh-huh.
sometimes even at the expense of others.
Okay.
And then we have the matchers who strive for a balance of give and take,
Right.
aiming for fairness in all their interactions.
It's funny, because when I was reading this, I actually remembered this story about venture capitalist David Hornick.
Okay.
He almost lost a major deal because the entrepreneur perceived him as a giver
Wow.
and was worried that he wouldn't be tough enough in negotiations.
That's a perfect example of how perceptions of giving can be really misleading.
Yeah.
It's tempting to believe that takers are the ones who climb the ladder of success.
Right.
After all, they're always looking out for number one.
Right.
But then you look at cases like the Enron scandal with Ken Lay at the helm,
Uh-huh.
and it really makes you question that assumption.
Yeah. It's almost like appearances can be deceiving,
Definitely.
especially in the business world.
Yeah.
So then how do we make sense of the fact that, according to the research givers, seem to occupy both the highest and lowest rungs of the success ladder?
Right.
What's going on with this paradox of giving?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Giving doesn't automatically equal success. There's a lot more to it.
Right.
To understand this paradox, we need to dig deeper.
Okay.
One fascinating study Grant highlights looked at software engineers, and it found that the most productive engineers were the ones who were consistently giving more than they received. The true givers,
Yeah.
they were exceeding even the matchers in terms of their output.
So it's not just about being a giver, it's about how you give,
Exactly.
and maybe even how often.
Yeah.
What makes the difference between a giver who thrives and one who flounders?
That's where things get really interesting. It seems that these highly successful givers had cultivated a reputation for being reliable and generous colleagues. And that, in turn, led to more support and collaboration from their peers,
Okay.
ultimately boosting their individual success.
So maybe it's like a ripple effect, where acts of giving create a more collaborative and supportive environment that benefits everyone involved.
Exactly.
This makes me think about the whole concept of networking and how we build those connections that can help us succeed.
Sure.
What comes to mind is Adam Rifkin, who has been called Fortune's best networker. And he built this incredible network by consistently operating as a giver.
Rifkin's story is a brilliant illustration of how powerful giving can be when it comes to forging those lasting relationships.
Yeah.
What sets him apart is his focus on making a genuine difference in the lives of the people he connects with. And here's a key takeaway for all of us.
Okay.
Rifkin emphasizes the often overlooked power of dormant ties.
Dormant ties. I think you're going to have to explain that one.
Think of those LinkedIn connections you haven't spoken to in years.
Right.
People you've simply lost touch with.
Yeah.
Those are your dormant ties. And research suggests that reactivating these dormant ties can be even more beneficial than relying on our usual weak ties
Okay.
when we're looking for new information or perspectives.
So you're saying that those connections from way back when, they could actually be more valuable than the people we regularly interact with.
It might seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but it makes sense when you think about it.
Pick up.
Both you and those dormant ties have moved on in your lives, gained new experiences,
Right.
expanded your networks.
Yeah.
You bring something fresh to the table for each other.
Okay, I'm sold on the idea, but now I need to know, how do I actually reactivate these dormant ties? Do I just send a random email out of the blue?
It can be as simple as that.
Really?
Reach out, acknowledge the time that's passed,
Oh.
express genuine interest in what they're up to,
Right.
and maybe offer your support if it seems appropriate.
Okay.
The key is to be genuine and sincere in your approach.
This has been a really eye-opening look at how we can leverage the power of giving in our personal and professional lives.
It really is.
It makes you realize that giving isn't just some selfless act.
Yeah,
It can actually be a strategic advantage.
absolutely. And we're just scratching the surface here.
Right.
There's so much more to explore when it comes to the different ways giving can manifest itself in our lives.
Up next, we're going to dive into some fascinating examples of people who've mastered the art of giving in different domains, from creative collaboration to talent recognition.
It's good.
Buckle up, because it's about to get even more interesting.
I'm ready. You know, one of the most fascinating contrasts Grant explores is the difference between the lone genius's approach and the idea of a collaborative genius. He uses Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous architect,
Right.
and George Meyer, the comedic mind behind The Simpsons, to illustrate this.
Now that you mention it, I remember that section of the book.
Yeah.
It really got me thinking about how different personalities approach success.
Uh-huh.
Right? It was all about individual brilliance isolating himself to create these masterpieces.
Yeah.
Meyer, on the other hand, thrived in a collaborative setting, often choosing to do the behind-the-scenes work of rewriting to make the team's work shine.
What's remarkable is that Meyer, a true giver, chose to prioritize the team's success over individual recognition.
Yeah, you would think that
Yeah.
would be kind of counterintuitive in a field like comedy writing,
Yeah.
where individual recognition is so highly valued.
Yeah.
But it seems like his willingness to give to the team actually earned him even more respect and trust from his colleagues,
Uh-huh.
which ultimately contributed to greater success for everyone.
It did.
I'm starting to see a pattern here.
It's a great observation, and it ties in with the research Grant cites, which shows that giving within a team actually boosts both group performance and individual recognition.
Okay.
So you're not just helping others, you're also helping yourself in the long run.
That's a win-win for sure.
Right. It is.
This next section of the book really resonated with me
Okay.
because it focuses on talent and how we recognize it. Grant tells the story of C.J. Skander,
Yeah.
a legendary accounting professor.
Legendary accounting professor. Now, that's not something you hear every day.
I know, right? It piqued my curiosity, too.
Yeah.
What I found fascinating is that Skander is known for his unconventional teaching style,
Uh-huh.
his infectious enthusiasm, and his uncanny ability to spot talent in his students.
He's like a talent whisperer.
Yeah.
And his secret is this. He believes that interest precedes talent.
Interesting.
It's about finding that spark of curiosity in a student and then nurturing it.
Makes you wonder how many potentially talented individuals out there never actually discover their passions simply because they haven't been exposed to the right spark.
It's a thought-provoking point,
Yeah.
and it underscores the importance of mentors and teachers who can guide us, help us explore different fields and discover what truly resonates with us.
Speaking of making choices and sticking with them, I have a confession to make.
Okay.
I've fallen prey to the sunk cost fallacy more times than I care to admit.
Oh, we've all been there.
Yeah.
It's a cognitive bias that can trip up even the best of us.
Yes.
That tendency to overinvest in things, whether it's a project or a relationship,
Right.
even when the evidence suggests we should cut our losses and move on.
It's like throwing good money after bad. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Grant uses the example of the NBA draft to illustrate this point.
Uh-huh.
Teams often cling to high draft picks even when those players aren't performing well.
Yeah.
It's as if the higher the initial investment, the harder it is to admit defeat.
And it's not just limited to sports.
Right.
We see it in business decisions, investment strategies, even personal relationships.
Yeah.
We get so attached to our past investments, whether it's time, money, or effort, that we struggle to let go.
But why do we do this? What's the psychology behind this stubborn refusal to admit we were wrong?
Research suggests that ego threat plays a major role. We're so invested in being right, in proving that our initial judgment was sound,
Right?
that we double down even when it's clearly not in our best interest.
Wow.
Admitting defeat can feel like a personal failure, and our egos just can't handle that.
So it's about saving face,
Often it is.
even when it means continuing down a path that's not leading us anywhere. I think Grant's comparison to Stu Inman, the successful NBA executive, and Michael Jordan, the basketball legend, really drives this point home.
Inman was known for his willingness to cut losses even when it came to high draft picks.
Yeah.
He understood that clinging to players who weren't performing well wouldn't lead to team success.
Right.
Jordan, on the other hand, has been criticized for his tendency to escalate commitment as an executor. It seems that even the greatest of players can fall victim to this bias.
It's a humbling reminder that we all have our blind spots, even those we admire.
Yeah.
Now, here's something I found truly counterintuitive.
Yeah.
The idea that giving could actually be a powerful strategy for influencing others.
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does.
But this is where Grant introduces the concept of powerless communication.
Okay.
He challenges the conventional wisdom that assertiveness and confidence are always the best ways to persuade and influence.
Wait, are you telling me that being less assertive can actually help you get ahead?
It can.
That's not exactly what they teach you in business school.
It's not about being a pushover,
Okay.
but about strategically leveraging vulnerability and a willingness to seek advice.
Okay.
Grant shares the compelling story of Dave Walton, a successful trial lawyer who happens to have a stutter.
A trial lawyer with a stutter? That seems like it would be a major disadvantage.
You think so?
Yeah.
In a profession where persuasive speaking is so crucial.
Right.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But Walton actually discovered that his stutter became a source of genuine connection with juries. It made him appear more human, more relatable, less like a slick lawyer trying to manipulate them.
So it's like that saying, perfection is the enemy of good.
Right.
Sometimes showing your vulnerability can make you more persuasive.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how this applies to givers. They're often more willing to admit weaknesses,
Yeah.
ask questions, and seek advice.
Right.
They're not afraid to show a little vulnerability.
Exactly. And this can be surprisingly disarming, especially in a world where everyone is trying to project an image of strength and confidence.
Right.
It signals a willingness to learn, a genuine interest in the perspectives of others.
Yeah, think about those times when someone has asked for your advice.
Right.
It's flattering, right?
Yeah.
It makes you feel valued and respected.
Absolutely.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like you're inviting people to collaborate with you rather than trying to impose your ideas on them.
Exactly.
But how do we actually put this into practice? How can we leverage this idea of powerless communication to become more influential?
Grant outlines several techniques that givers excel at using.
Okay.
These include asking questions, speaking tentatively, and openly seeking advice. They're comfortable saying things like, I don't know, or what do you think?
Right.
This creates a sense of partnership rather than a one-sided pitch.
It seems like powerless communication is all about building rapport and trust.
It is.
Are more likely to open up and share their ideas when they feel like they're being heard and respected.
Precisely. It's about shifting the focus from self-promotion to a genuine interest in others.
Yeah.
It might take some practice, especially for those of us who aren't natural givers.
Right.
But cultivating a genuine curiosity and a willingness to learn from others can make all the difference.
This all sounds great in theory, but I'm curious, what about the challenge that givers face?
Sure.
Seems like all this giving could lead to burnout or even exploitation.
Right.
How do we avoid becoming a doormat?
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
It's not about becoming a martyr for the cause of giving.
Right.
Grant explores this very issue, outlining the traps that can lead some givers to struggle while others thrive.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more about these traps. I want to make sure I'm giving effectively without sacrificing my own well-being. So how do we walk that fine line between being generous and getting taken advantage of? What are the secrets to being an effective giver without burning out or becoming a doormat?
Well, Grant dives right into that, exploring what he calls the doormat effect. He highlights 3 common traps that many givers fall into: being too trusting, too empathetic, and too timid.
Ouch. I think I've stumbled into all 3 of those traps at some point in my life. You want to be helpful and kind, but sometimes it feels like people take advantage of that.
It's a common struggle, but the good news is that there are strategies we can use to overcome these challenges. One of Grant's key strategies is what he calls sincerity screening. It's all about learning to differentiate between genuine givers and those who might be disguised takers, like wolves in sheep's clothing.
So not everyone who appears generous is actually a giver at heart. Some people might just be really good at playing the part.
Exactly. Think back to Ken Lay and the Enron scandal. He cultivated this image of a generous leader donating to charities and charming politicians, but behind that facade, he was manipulating the system for his own personal gain.
Okay, so how do we spot these fakers? What are some red flags we should be looking out for?
Grant suggests paying attention to patterns of behavior. Look beyond those grand gestures and focus on consistent actions over time. Ask yourself, does this person genuinely prioritize helping others even when there's no immediate benefit to themselves?
It's like that saying, actions speak louder than words. We need to look beyond the surface and observe how people actually behave.
Now, what about empathy? That seems like a positive quality, but you mentioned it can be a trap for givers. How so?
Empathy is a powerful emotion. It allows us to connect with others on a deep level and understand their feelings. But in certain situations, like negotiations, focusing too much on the other person's emotions can cloud our judgment and lead us to make concessions that we later regret.
So it's about finding that balance between being empathetic and standing up for our own needs. Exactly. It's about perspective taking, understanding the other person's point of view, their interests, and their motivations, without letting their emotions completely dictate our decisions.
This sounds a lot like the otherish giving style that Grant talks about.
Yeah.
That sweet spot between selflessness and selfishness.
Precisely. Otherish givers find ways to benefit both themselves and others. They're generous and helpful, but also know how to advocate for their own needs. They're not afraid to say no when necessary.
It makes me think of the story about Peter Udet, the financial advisor, who learned to be more assertive in negotiations while still maintaining his identity as a giver.
Audet's story is a great example of how givers can overcome the too timid trap. It's about finding your voice, being willing to speak up for yourself and your interests without turning into a taker.
I think a lot of givers struggle with this. We want to be helpful and accommodating, but sometimes that can lead to us being taken advantage of. So how do we develop that assertiveness muscle?
It takes practice. Start by setting small boundaries, saying no to things that drain you or don't align with your values. Remember, advocating for your own needs doesn't make you a bad person. It simply allows you to create a more sustainable approach to giving, so you can continue to help others without sacrificing your own well-being.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground when it comes to individual giving. But what about creating a culture of giving within groups or organizations? How do we encourage giving even among those who might be naturally inclined to be takers or matchers?
That's where the concept of the Scrooge shift comes into play. Grant explores how we can create environments that nudge even the most reluctant givers towards generosity.
With the Scrooge shift, like Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol, are you telling me we can transform even the stingiest of Scrooges into a generous giver?
Well, maybe not that extreme. But Grant uses the example of FreeCycle, that online community where people give away things for free, to illustrate how creating a culture of giving can have a powerful influence.
Well, I love FreeCycle. I've used it a few times to get rid of old furniture and things like that. It's like a giant virtual yard sale.
Exactly, and it's a brilliant example of a generalized giving system. It establishes a norm where giving is expected and reciprocated. Even takers participate because it's a convenient way to get rid of unwanted stuff.
But do those takers actually become givers over time? Or are they just taking advantage of the system for their own benefit?
That's the fascinating part. Research shows that even takers who initially join FreeCycle for purely selfish reasons start to care about the people they're helping. It's like giving becomes contagious. Once you experience those positive feelings associated with helping others, it becomes easier and more rewarding to continue giving.
That's encouraging. It's just that maybe deep down we all have the potential to be givers.
It's certainly a possibility, and it highlights the power of social influence. When we're surrounded by people who are generous and helpful, it rubs off on us.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if we want to become more giving, maybe we need to surround ourselves with givers.
That's a great point. It's not just about changing individual behavior. It's about creating systems and structures that promote and support giving. Another example Grant discusses is the reciprocity ring, a structured exercise where people publicly share requests and offer help to one another.
I've never heard of the reciprocity ring. How's that work?
It's quite simple, really. People gather in a group, and each person shares a request, something they need help with. It could be anything from finding a job to learning a new skill or getting advice on a personal matter.
And then what happens?
The other participants brainstorm ways to help. They offer their knowledge, their resources, their connections, and they make public commitments to follow through on their offers.
So it's like a public display of giving. Everyone sees who's asking for help and who's stepping up to provide it.
Exactly. And that public accountability is key. It creates a sense of obligation even for those who might not be naturally inclined to give. No one wants to appear selfish or unhelpful in that setting.
It's like the opposite of the bystander effect, where people are less likely to help someone in need when they're in a crowd because they assume someone else will take responsibility. This reciprocity ring turns that on its head.
Absolutely. It makes giving visible and celebrated, encouraging even the most reluctant participants to get involved.
So you're telling me that even takers can be nudged towards giving. That's pretty remarkable.
It's not about turning everyone into a saint, but about creating environments where giving becomes the norm, where it's recognized and rewarded.
This brings us back to that idea of otherish giving, finding that sweet spot where we're helping others while also looking out for our own interests. It seems like this approach is key to sustainable giving.
You hit the nail on the head. As Grant points out, the most successful givers are those who find ways to benefit both themselves and others. It's not about self-sacrifice, it's about finding that balance where giving becomes a source of energy and fulfillment.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of giving. We've covered so much ground, from understanding different reciprocity styles to exploring the traps that givers can fall into. But now I'm curious, what are some practical steps we can take to become more effective givers in our own lives?
That's a great question, and it's one that Grant addresses directly in the final chapter of his book. He offers a wealth of practical advice on how to make giving a sustainable and fulfilling part of our lives.
Perfect. Let's wrap things up by exploring some actionable steps we can take to start giving more effectively.
One strategy Grant recommends is chunking our giving. Instead of spreading ourselves thin across multiple commitments, we can focus our efforts on a few key areas where we can have a greater impact.
So it's like consolidating your giving portfolio. Instead of having lots of small scattered investments, you create a few larger, more focused ones.
That's a great analogy. And research suggests that chunking our giving can actually make us happier and more effective. We experience a greater sense of impact, and it's less likely to lead to burnout.
This reminds me of the story about Conry Callahan, the young teacher who was struggling to balance her demanding job at Overbrook High School with her desire to give back to her community.
She was giving so much of herself that she was completely drained. It seemed like she was on the verge of burnout.
Right, but instead of giving up entirely, she got strategic about her giving. She started volunteering as a mentor for other teachers and founded a mentoring program for high-achieving, low-income students. But she chunked these commitments into manageable blocks of time, focusing her efforts on specific days and times.
And this allowed her to really see the impact of her giving. It became more than just a drop in the bucket. It was a tangible, meaningful contribution.
It also highlights the importance of building a support network as givers. We need to make sure we're not giving in isolation. We need people we can turn to for help and encouragement, people who can remind us why our giving matters.
It's like that research on the tend and befriend response to stress. When we feel overwhelmed or burned out, our natural inclination is to connect with others, to seek support and build relationships. Think about it when you're feeling stressed. Don't you often reach out to a friend for support? That's the tend and befriend response in action.
So giving can actually be a way to combat burnout by strengthening our connections with others.
Absolutely. When we give to others, we create a sense of reciprocity, a feeling of obligation to help those who have helped us. It's like we're investing in a social safety net, a network of people who will be there for us when we need them.
And this is where that otherish giving style really shines, right?
Yeah.
Because it allows us to build strong, mutually beneficial relationships where everyone feels valued and supported.
Exactly. It's not about giving without any expectation of return. It's about creating a virtuous cycle of giving and receiving where everyone benefits. And this brings us to what I think is the most exciting part of Grant's argument, the idea that giving can actually be a path to personal success.
That's a bold claim. We're so conditioned to believe that success is about competition, about getting ahead, even if it means stepping on others.
I know it goes against everything we've been taught, but Grant challenges that assumption, arguing that giving can actually fuel our energy, boost our happiness, and ultimately lead to greater success in all areas of our lives.
This makes me think of John Huntsman Sr., the billionaire philanthropist, who believes that giving is the key to both wealth and happiness.
Huntsman's story is a powerful testament to the idea that giving can be a source of both material and emotional abundance. He doesn't just give back after achieving success. He believes that giving is what enabled him to achieve success in the first place.
So it's like giving is an investment not just in others, but in ourselves.
Precisely. And research supports this idea. Studies have shown that people who give their time, money, and energy to others report higher levels of happiness, health, and even longevity.
It seems like Grant is saying that giving isn't just a nice thing to do. It's a smart thing to do if we want to live a fulfilling and successful life.
Exactly. And it brings us full circle back to that idea that we're all interconnected. By giving to others, we're ultimately giving to ourselves.
What a powerful message to end on. I think this is something we can all take to heart, regardless of our current reciprocity style.
So what does this all mean for you? It suggests that giving, when done strategically and with a healthy dose of self-interest, can be a powerful force for good, not just for others, but for ourselves as well. If giving can be energizing rather than exhausting, could it be the missing ingredient in your own quest for success? It's something to ponder.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And if you're looking for ways to start giving more effectively, check out some of the online communities and platforms we mentioned today, like FreeCycle Kickstarter and Kiva. They offer a great way to experience the power of giving firsthand.
Until next time, keep diving deep. And remember, the world needs your gifts.
See you on the next deep dive.